We're going to start with a reading from Emmett Fox.
Okay, the reading is entitled The Fourth Man. When Nebuchadnezzar sent out his decree that everyone in his kingdom should bow down and worship the golden image that he had erected, there were three men who refused to obey. These were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hebrew officials in the province of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar called them before him, and they bluntly told the king that their God would deliver them from the fiery furnace to which they would be consigned. But even if God did not deliver them, they would still serve him and him alone. Nebuchadnezzar had the three men thrust into the fiery furnace, and the heat was so intense that it slew the guards who threw them in. Then, as he looked in upon the three faithful Hebrews, Nebuchadnezzar was astonished to find a fourth man walking in the flames with the other three. Don't worry about it. It's just an alert. Okay. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked out of the fiery furnace without blemish or scar. So it is when we hold steadfastly to God and give all power to him. He sends his messenger to deliver us from our furnace of fear and frustration. Then do we know that nothing shall by any means harm us. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him. That was from Daniel chapter 3. Take your time, Brian.
So I told you all that the talk was going to be about As Love Met Hate. Well, until 5 o'clock today, it was going to be that. At 5 o'clock, I sort of had a leading to take a look at Washington Post Online. Not something I normally do at this time of day, but I found an article that was so right for this moment that I said, okay, God, we're going to talk about it, and the other one will just come at a later time. But it may be it looks to me like maybe a series of three on the overall topic. And the title of the article was Struggling to Find Happiness While You're Stuck at Home? Experts say contentment is enough. And I want to broaden it. It's not just an issue of stuck at home. Another article commented on the fact we're experiencing pretty much unprecedented, at least in recent times, turmoil, tension, uncertainty on so many levels, whether we're talking physical health, the political situation, the situation in terms of black people and brown people getting killed, and the rage that's being expressed for that, to say nothing of the far right people. So we have all this tension going on, and this plus some other words I'm going to add, I think are a good address to those of us, who, at least in this church, who seek a closer spiritual connection with the divine, as well as being in service to the divine. So the first part I'll be reading, then I'll be talking some. Many of us are experiencing hardship during the pandemic. This is a time of extreme challenge, and there's a lot to feel anxious about right now. We're in the middle of an enormous social experiment, and the results are becoming clearer every day. It's what we brought into the pandemic that's causing us unnecessary suffering and expectation of happiness. No, it doesn't mean that misery is the answer. What it means is that pursuing happiness as a strategy for human well-being is not the sure ticket many people think it is. There are other ways to build a life of wellness that take a different approach. And He goes on to talk a bit. His life's work has been looking at the commonality of human emotions. He talks about visiting a village, one of 3 villages in Bhutan that, to the best of their knowledge, had never been in contact in any way, shape, or form with the outside world. No internet, no reading, no newspapers. It was just that village. And they traveled to it, a settlement of about 200 families. And it was part of the culmination of a 5-year study to identify which human emotions are universal among cultures. And they brought a list of emotions with them, from shame to joy to embarrassment, to see if they could be recognized. If I remember the study correctly, they had photos of people with facial expressions representing such things as shame, joy, embarrassment. And they brought them to show to people in this 200 person village, 200 family village, to see if they recognized some or all of these emotions. And he says, incredibly, when we showed villagers dozens of facial and vocal expressions, they recognized the majority of them. But there was one emotion that they prized above all others: contentment. The guide for the group and the translator explained what their idea of contentment was. It is the highest achievement of human well-being, and it is what the greatest enlightened masters have been writing about for thousands of years. It basically means that right here, right now, everything is perfect as it is, regardless of what you're experiencing on the outside. As he thought about it, this writer realized that wherever he went across the globe, all the cultures he interacted with believed passionately in contentment. And so, reflecting against this, how people, at least in this culture, are obsessing about happiness in this uncertain time, and are feeling more anxious, depressed, and stressed. So he and his team went through 5,000 years of human philosophy, 200 years of scientific research on the nature of the mind. And they found that there are two common strategies for how people address finding well-being. The first is the more strategy, where people try to find more money, more power, more stuff, and they believe that'll make them happy. And then he goes to say, if I offered you $1,000 right now, I'm sure you would be very happy. But studies show that as soon as you put that money into your pocket, the happiness tends to diminish. And shortly after that, you find yourself needing another hit of something in order to feel happy again, or as happy. And he says there's nothing wrong with temporary boosts for happiness, but the problem with the more strategy is that it's not sustainable. The second approach is what he calls the enough strategy. And he says, while sifting through thousands of years of ancient wisdom traditions, we found that the ancients almost never used the word happiness while talking about a good life. They used the word contentment and described it as a state of unconditional wholeness, regardless of what is happening externally. And this really hit home because I have watched over time with Lyft, as I've described what Lyft helps people accomplish, and more I include in it joy, experiencing joy, love, success, fulfillment, and contentment. So I am unknowingly sort of mirroring what so many cultures regard as important. These enough strategy people believe we can feel contentment even when our external environment is complete chaos. It doesn't mean accepting injustices or status quo, because we do need to work for what we feel is right. whether in good times or in challenging times like now. But he references, for instance, the unflinching calm of a Formula One driver taking a corner at 180 miles per hour. I'll have to take his word on that one. But I thought of it in terms of my experience sharing Sunday nights with you when we come together as a community and we share spiritual exploration, share our lives, share our caring, share our spiritual silence. And I'm going to cut away from the article now. That got me thinking of the old Quakers and the Amish. One of the common comments about Quakers, and I've seen it made about Amish too, is their faces radiate with calm, and I've actually heard the word obvious contentment. The Amish have defined their lives so that there's no striving. There is the family, there is the community, and that is what is emphasized in their lives. Even when the maniac, a couple, 3 years ago up in Cleveland, slaughtered 7 Amish school children, reporters were amazed that it didn't destroy the community. There was grief, there was sadness, but they continued on. And they were content even though they were missing these children. And Quakers, the same thing. With the older Quakers I knew, there was just a peace about them. What I thought of or heard as a holy silence in what they did. And I recognizing from this contentment. They always worked to reach out and lift up the world. But they were not, that I can never remember, I'm sure there were cases, distraught about the situation. They were just doing what they were called to do. And that's a contentment each of us can have. We're already, each of us, along the path or we wouldn't be here in this church. And I want to be clear here. I remember our next door neighbor, when we first moved into where we are now, invited us to join him to attend his Baptist church for a session. And we went, and the minister spent the entire time telling the congregation how lucky they were to be coming to this church because this guaranteed they were going to heaven. From what I know of each of you, we're simply walking, content that step by step, we're doing the best we can to be connected with the divine, to do the best we can on this earth. And again, from what I know of you, some I know better than others, yeah, we fall short. It doesn't destroy us. But remember, one of the things that we are taught pretty consistently by everyone who teaches and what we read is the divine always welcomes us. We can be content in that. And that contentment can be contagious. There's a meditation I've recently read that I'll be doing a talk on later that talks about how, I'm going to paraphrase words a bit, being centered in the divine, being centered in or anchored in the contentment, in okayness, gives us the opportunity to be the support for people who are stumbling. Now, stumbling because they're scared, stumbling because life isn't working out, stumbling because they've had a loss, stumbling because perhaps everything they've ever thought would happen or they'd have or they'd believe has been calling into question. I'm not saying that we need to be out evangelizing, no, because the Quakers have always believed that by and large God brought to us, well, actually, I'll quote Sister Pepper, far more powerful. The people who are your flock are the ones who come to you or who are brought to you. But it's valuable for each of us to know that we have a tie to the divine. We don't need more tie, though we always welcome becoming closer to the divine. But that we can acknowledge there is this spark of God in the heart, always tied to divine love. And that from this spark of God, each of us can reach out and provide an anchor to those around us who are our flock, who need to hear what we have to say. Whether it's just the kind word, whether it's a listening, caring ear to someone who needs to feel that somebody cares about them, whether it's the word that this too will pass. That's one of the things later in this article he talks about. Contentment recognizes that most things are ephemeral. They'll pass. The things we're going through here now, in the volume that they are now, they'll pass. Contentment is permanent, can be permanent. And as people walking in the light, boy, have we got an opportunity to help others not fall down, not fall into expecting the worst. Many years ago in the 80s, I had a pretty dismal view of this country and the people therein. And then I started touring, doing shows, and I realized reasonably quickly, most people are wonderful. Yeah, there's pretty nasty people, but they're ephemeral too most of the time. In this time, these upsets, let us hold on to the permanence of divine love, the permanence of our connection to the divine, the permanence of the opportunity for us to be representatives of this stable, loving divine. To those who've lost that sense or perhaps never had it, or perhaps have a vision or had a vision of the divine that no longer fits. You know, Sister Pepper used to talk about when you're talking to someone of a different belief or who's lost belief, as Paul talked about, you don't feed them meat right away, you feed them milk. And this is sort of a sidebar, going down a side trail for a moment. When you are talking with folks who are lost, who are terrified, who are hurting, who are sick, who are scared of change, because by gosh, we're going through it now. We don't need to share all of it. What? You talk to dead people? I had one of those recently. Unfortunately, she asked. I wouldn't have told her, but she asked, and I'm not going to lie. It's okay to be anchored yourself. It's okay to share the anchor with others. It's also okay to know when not to share. There are some people who may cross your path, but they're not your flock. And what you say will fall on deaf ears. The whole thing about, in the Bible, casting seed over shallow ground, barren ground, rocks. When you walk in the Spirit, let the Spirit show you what to say and when to say. And walk with rejoicing, whether you've said something or simply, as Norman Vincent Peale said, cast a lightning bolt of love on somebody who otherwise you don't want to touch or can't touch. We can love people from afar. And Norman Vincent Peale was absolutely convinced. A lightning bolt, prayer, love, it does lots of good too. I think I mentioned a time or two ago, oh dear, what's the father that used to run the program here? He's in Arizona.
No, Father Richard Rohr.
Father Richard Rohr was talking about how amazing it was recently when he realized that time wasn't a fixed item. He could launch a prayer for something that happened back then and know his prayer had some effect. We can launch a prayer for someone who might be so caught up in anger or fear or hatred now. And we can launch it back to when they were first heard. What happens after that is up to God, but at least we put our caring and our loving in with the divine order. And every day, as we are in the habit here, do give gratitude to God for your contentment, for bringing right order to everything, whether we see it or not. Harold Hill talks about that. He says, God promises answers when we pray. He doesn't guarantee we're ever going to see the answers or understand what they are. But walking in contentment, we can certainly spread warmth and a sense of safety to people who may have no other opportunity to experience it or to learn that they too, as children of God, are welcomed into contentment, welcomed into knowing that they are safe in the arms of the divine. Dear God, let my love for you and my contentment and peace be contagious.